Shuttle approached the human warship slowly. Through the small window, he could see the vessel called Indomitable. It looked ordinary. The metal hull was gray and with old battle marks. Some panels were newer than others, showing recent repairs. This was supposed to be one of humanity's finest warships, but had expected something more impressive. He was a military analyst for the Covenant Alliance. His people had just formed an alliance with humanity to fight against the Empire. There were brutal warriors, known across the galaxy for their strength and violence. They had crushed dozens of worlds, but somehow humans had fought them to a standstill. His mission was simple: observe the humans and understand how they fought. The Covenant Council needed to know what kind of allies they had gained. Were the stories about human warriors true or just propaganda? The shuttle docked with a soft thump, gathered his recording equipment and stepped into the airlock. The door opened with a hiss. A human stood waiting for him. The man was tall by human standards but shorter than. He wore a dark blue uniform with silver markings on the shoulders. His face was calm, almost friendly. "Welcome aboard the Indomitable," the human said. "I'm Captain. You must be our observer from the Covenant." Bowed in the Covenant manner. "Yes, Captain, I am. Thank you for allowing me on your ship." Smiled and extended his hand. Had studied human customs and knew this meant a handshake. He carefully grasped the captain's hand. The human's grip was firm but not aggressive. "Come on, I'll show you around," said. As they walked through the corridors, observed everything. The ship was clean but worn. Crew members passed them, all wearing the same dark blue uniforms. They nodded respectfully to their captain but seemed relaxed, even casual. Some were laughing and talking. This surprised. On Covenant ships, military discipline was strict and formal. They entered the bridge. It was smaller than expected. Stations lined the walls, each with screens showing various data. Crew members sat at their positions, working quietly. "This is Lieutenant," said, gesturing to a young woman at the tactical station. "She's our tactical officer." Turned and gave a quick smile. "Nice to meet you. Hope you enjoy your stay." Studied her. She looked young, maybe in her late 20s by human standards. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun. Her fingers moved quickly across her console, but she seemed completely at ease. Over the next few hours, met more of the crew. Sergeant commanded the ship's Marines. He was shorter than most humans had seen, but his body was thick with muscle. He spoke little but watched everything with sharp eyes. Engineer was responsible for keeping the ship running. She had grease on her hands and a friendly smile. "Don't worry," she told. "The ship looks rough, but she'll hold together. I make sure of that." Recorded all his observations. The humans seemed normal. They were physically smaller than warriors. They had no natural armor or enhanced senses like some species. Their technology was good but not exceptional. What made them dangerous? That night was given quarters near the observation deck. He was writing his initial report when the ship's alarm suddenly blared. Red lights flashed in the corridor outside. He rushed to the bridge. The atmosphere had completely changed. The casual, relaxed crew was gone. In their place were focused warriors. Every person moved with purpose. "Report," Captain said sharply. "Distress signal from Covenant Colony 7, replied. Her voice was steady. "Attack force. 3 heavy cruisers and multiple fighters. They're bombarding the colony." "How many civilians?" asked. "Estimated 40,000. Felt his blood chill. Colony 7 was barely defended. It would be slaughtered. "Set course for Colony 7, maximum speed," ordered. "Battle stations. Notify the crew." Captain spoke up. "We are only one ship. They have 3 cruisers. Should we not wait for reinforcements?" Looked at him. The captain's face was calm, but his eyes were hard. "Those people don't have time for reinforcements. We're going." The ship lurched as the engines engaged, grabbed a rail to steady himself. Around him, the crew prepared for battle, but something was wrong. They weren't afraid. They weren't even nervous. Sergeant walked onto the bridge, now wearing combat armor. "Marines are ready, Captain. We're locked and loaded." "Good," replied. "We'll get you a boarding opportunity." "Appreciate it, sir," said with what looked like a grin. Was confused. Did the sergeant just smile? They were heading into a battle against superior numbers, and he smiled. Lieutenant was running calculations at her station. Another crew member, a young man named, brought her a cup of something hot. Coffee, remembered it was called. "Thanks," said. "Going to be a busy day." "Always is," replied. Watched in disbelief. They were discussing the coming battle like it was routine work. Dr. Sora arrived on the bridge, a small medical kit in her hands. "I've prepped medical bay. We'll be ready." "I know you will," the captain said. As the Indomitable raced toward the battle, observed the crew. They checked weapons and systems. They made jokes. Someone was playing music quietly at one station. Engineer was humming while she rerouted power to the weapons. This was wrong. This was all wrong. They should be afraid. They should be tense and worried. There were monsters. They killed without mercy. They enjoyed violence. But these humans, they weren't scared, they were eager. Captain stood at the center of the bridge, hands clasped behind his back. He looked completely calm. "ETA to Colony 7. 20 minutes, sir," came the reply. "What's our tactical situation?" 3 heavy cruisers as reported. They're in orbital bombardment formation. They won't see us coming until we're close. "Perfect," said. "We'll hit them hard and fast, disable their engines first, be ready for boarding action." "Yes, sir," the sergeant replied. Moved to an observer station at the back of the bridge. His hands shook as he activated his recording equipment. He was supposed to observe and report, but he had a terrible feeling that he was about to witness something that would change everything he thought he knew. The Indomitable dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Colony 7 system. On the main screen, could see the battle. The ships hung over the colony world like predators. Explosions bloomed on the planet's surface. "They're killing civilians," said quietly. Her voice was cold now. "Not for much longer," Captain replied. He turned to his crew. Every human on the bridge looked at their captain. "Today we show them what happens when they threaten the innocent," said. "Today we remind them why they should fear us. All stations engage at will." The crew responded as one, "Yes, sir." The Indomitable surged forward and gripped his station. He was about to learn why the galaxy trembled before humanity. The war had just become very real. The Indomitable raced toward the fleet. Watched the main screen, his body tense with fear. 3 massive cruisers floated above the colony world. Each one was larger than the human ship. Each one carried enough weapons to destroy a small moon. "Enemy detecting us," reported. Her fingers moved across her console. "They're turning to engage." "Expected," Captain said calmly. "Continue on course." Couldn't understand this. The ships outnumbered them 3-1. They had superior firepower. The logical choice was to retreat and call for help, but the humans weren't retreating. "Weapons range in 30 seconds, announced. "Target the lead cruiser's engines," ordered. "Full power to forward shields." Engineer's voice came over the communication system. "Captain, I can give you about 90 seconds of full shield power before we start cooking down here." 90 seconds is all we need," replied. At his tactical station, Young was humming a tune. Recognized it from human culture files, an ancient song about war. How could he be so calm? 20 seconds to weapons range," said. The ships were firing now. Plasma bolts streaked across space toward the Indomitable. The human ship twisted and rolled, dodging most of them. The ones that hit crashed against the shields in bursts of light. "Shields holding," reported. 70 seconds left. 10 seconds, counted down. Realized he was holding his breath. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, firing. The Indomitable unleashed everything. Missiles streaked forward. Energy beams lanced out. Kinetic rounds hammered into the lead cruiser's engine section. Explosions rippled across the enemy ship's hull. "Direct hit," shouted. "Their engines are damaged." But they were firing back. The ship shook violently, was thrown against his station. Alarms blared. Red lights flashed across multiple consoles. "Hull breach on Deck 7, someone reported. "Sealing it now." 40 seconds of shields, warned. Captain stood firm, not even holding onto anything for support. "Target their weapons array. Fire at will." The Indomitable twisted again, presenting a different angle to the enemy. More weapons fired. More hits struck home. But the second cruiser was joining the fight now. Plasma fire tore into the human ship's side. The bridge shook hard. A console exploded in sparks. A crew member fell back, burned. Dr. Sara was there instantly, pulling the injured person away from the station. "I've got you," she said calmly. She treated the burns right there on the bridge, not even pausing as more weapons fire struck the ship. 10 seconds of shields. His voice was urgent now. Wanted to scream at them to retreat. This was suicide. They were going to die. "Prepare torpedo spread," said. His voice was steady as stone. "Target all 3 ships." "That will drain our entire torpedo magazine," replied. "I know." His fingers flew. "Torpedoes ready." "Fire." Every torpedo tube on the Indomitable launched at once. Dozens of missiles shot toward the fleet. The enemy ships tried to shoot them down, but there were too many. Explosions bloomed across all 3 cruisers. "Shields down," announced. They fired back. Without shields, the damage was catastrophic. The Indomitable lurched sideways. More consoles exploded. The lights flickered and dimmed. But notice something. Lieutenant was smiling, actually smiling as the ship was being torn apart around her. "Captain, we've got a problem," she said, but she didn't sound worried. She sounded excited. "The middle cruiser is trying to run." "Can't have that," replied. "You're up." Sergeant's voice came over the comm. "Marines ready, sir. Just get us close." What happened next made question if humans understood the concept of self-preservation. The Indomitable didn't retreat from the damaged ships. It accelerated toward them, directly at them. "Captain," finally shouted, "what are you doing?" Glanced at him, "Winning." The human ship raced toward the nearest cruiser, the one with damaged engines. Weapons fire tore at the Indomitable's hull. Could hear metal screaming and tearing. "Deck 9 is gone," someone reported. "Deck 10 is venting atmosphere." "Seal it," ordered. "Captain, there are still people in that section." "I know, seal it." The order was carried out. Felt sick. The humans had just sealed off part of their own ship, trapping their crew members inside to die. But it saved the rest of the ship from losing all its air. And nobody questioned the order. They just did it. The Indomitable came alongside the cruiser, so close the 2 ships nearly touched. This was insane. At this range, both ships would destroy each other. "Boarding tubes away," announced. Watched in horror as armored Marines shot across the gap between ships. They traveled through open space, through weapons fire, through the hell of a space battle. Some were hit and tumbled away into the void, but most made it. The boarding tubes attached to the hull and punched through. Marines poured into the enemy ship. On the bridge monitor could see helmet camera feeds. The Marines were inside the ship, fighting room by room. There were massive warriors, twice the size of humans, but the Marines didn't hesitate. They used the tight corridors to their advantage. They moved in teams. When one was wounded, another took their place. They pushed forward relentlessly. "This team has reached their engine room," reported. She was still working her console despite being covered in blood from a head wound. She hadn't even stopped to bandage it. "Tell him to disable it completely," said. The second cruiser was firing on the Indomitable again. The ship was falling apart. Fire suppression systems struggled to keep up with all the damage. Engineering reports main engine is critical, said. If we take another hit there, we're dead in space. Then we don't take another hit there, replied. Rotate the ship, give them our port side. Port side is already damaged, Captain. I know. The ship rotated, fired. The port side was torn open even further, could see space through the holes in the hull. But the engines survived. Enemy engine room secured. His voice came through, breathing hard. Planting charges now. You have 30 seconds to get back to the tubes, said. We'll make it, sir. On the monitor, watched the Marines running back through the ship. Warriors were chasing them. The humans were fighting as they retreated, covering each other, pulling wounded comrades along. They reached the boarding tubes with seconds to spare. Detonate, ordered. The charges exploded. The cruiser's engines went critical. The whole rear section of the enemy ship erupted in fire. It began to drift, powerless. 1 down, 2 to go. The second cruiser was pulling back, trying to gain distance. The third was still bombarding the colony but turning to face this new threat. Status asked. We've got maybe 40% combat effectiveness left, she replied. Hull breaches on 6 decks. Weapons batteries are at 30%. Engines are holding but barely. Good enough, said. Good enough wanted to scream. They were barely floating and the captain said it was good enough. But then he saw what the humans saw. The colony's defense stations were coming online. Covenant reinforcement ships were arriving at the edge of the system. They had lost their advantage. And they knew it. Enemy ships are retreating, announced. The 2 remaining cruisers turned and jumped to faster-than-light speed. They fled. The bridge was silent for a moment, then someone started laughing, then another. Soon the whole crew was laughing and cheering. They had won. Against impossible odds they had won. Dr. Sara moved through the bridge, checking on wounded crew members. You're all insane, she said, but she was smiling. Captain turned too. Are you all right, observer? Couldn't speak. He had just watched humans fight a battle that should have killed them all. They had deliberately damaged their own ship. They had sealed crew members in sections to die. They had charged into weapons fire and boarded an enemy vessel. And they had won. This, finally managed. This was a minor engagement. Shrugged, we've seen worse. That's when truly understood. This was normal for them. This suicide charge, this refusal to retreat, this absolute determination, this was just another day for human warriors. And somewhere in the galaxy, the Empire was learning to be afraid. The Indomitable limped to the nearest repair station. It took 3 days to get there, 3 days during which tried to make sense of what he had witnessed. The ship was a wreck. Whole sections were sealed off and exposed to space. Scorch marks covered the hull, yet the crew worked constantly, making temporary repairs, helping the wounded and somehow maintaining their spirits. Walked through the corridors, recording everything. He passed crew members who had lost friends in the battle. They grieved, but they also smiled and joked and kept working. How did they do it? On the second day, he found Engineer in the main engine room. She was covered in grease and sweat, repairing a damaged power conduit. Music played from a small speaker nearby, something upbeat and energetic. "Excuse me," said, "may I speak with you?" Looked up and grinned. "Sure, just let me finish this connection." She sealed the conduit and wiped her hands on a rag. "What can I do for you?" "I am trying to understand," began. "The battle. You fought against impossible odds. You deliberately damaged your own ship. People died. Yet everyone seems not traumatized." Sat down on a toolbox. "Well, we're not happy about the deaths. We'll hold a memorial service tomorrow, but yeah, I get what you mean." She gestured around the engine room. "This is what we do. We fight. We survive. We fix things and get ready for the next fight." "But why?" asked. "Why take such risks?" Because someone has to, said simply. Those people on the colony couldn't protect themselves. That would have killed them all, so we stepped in. She pulled out a small tablet. Here, let me show you something. She brought up files on human history. Had studied some of this before, but now showed him details he hadn't seen. This is Earth, she said, showing an image of a blue and green planet. Our home world, see how it looks all peaceful and pretty, she smiled. It's actually a death trap. She showed him more images. Massive storms that could level cities, earthquakes that split the ground open, volcanoes that buried entire regions in ash, animals with claws and teeth and venom. Humans evolved here? Asked, shocked. Yep, high gravity too higher than most species prefer. Our ancestors had to be tough just to survive childhood. Scrolled through more files. We're persistence hunters. You know what that means? Shook his head. It means we're not the fastest or strongest, but we don't give up. Our ancestors would chase prey for hours, sometimes days, until it collapsed from exhaustion. We just keep going. She showed him videos of humans running. One file showed something called a marathon, humans running for over 40 kilometers, just for sport. For fun? Asked in disbelief. You run until exhaustion for fun. Laughed. Some people do. Me, I prefer fixing engines. But yeah, endurance is kind of our thing. Over the next few hours showed him more. Humans had evolved as one of the weakest species on their planet. No claws, no fangs, no armor, but they had intelligence and they had stubbornness. They learned to make tools. They learned to work together. They conquered their death world through cooperation and refusal to quit. When we reached space, explained, we weren't the most advanced species, but we adapted. We learned. And when they started their expansion, we were one of the few species that fought back effectively. Because you don't give up, said slowly. Exactly. Later found Young in the ship's small gym. The ensign was running on a machine, sweat pouring down his face. How long have you been running? Asked. Glanced at a timer. About an hour. I'll do another 30 minutes, then some strength training. You were on duty for 12 hours today. I know, said, not even breathing hard. But if I don't stay in shape, I might slow down the crew in the next battle. Can't have that. Watched this young human run for another 30 minutes without stopping. His body was smaller than a warrior's. He was barely an adult by human standards, but he pushed himself harder than most species could imagine. When finally stopped, asked, "Does it not hurt?" "Of course it hurts," said, stretching. "That's how you know it's working." That evening visited the medical bay. Dr. Sora was checking on patients. The bay was full of wounded from the battle. Some had lost limbs, others had severe burns, but none were complaining. "Doctor, may I ask you about human physiology?" said. Sora looked up from a patient. "Sure, what do you want to know?" "During the battle, I saw injured crew members continue fighting. How is this possible?" Sora smiled. "Adrenaline, mostly. It's a chemical our bodies produce in dangerous situations. It blocks pain, increases strength, and sharpens our senses. Basically, our bodies have an emergency mode for when we're in trouble." She brought up a holographic display of human anatomy. "We also have redundant systems. 2 kidneys, 2 lungs. If one is damaged, we can survive on the other. Our bodies can function even with significant damage, at least for a while." "But that seems inefficient for normal life," said. "It is," Sora agreed. "Evolution didn't optimize us for comfort. It optimized us for survival. Our ancestors needed to escape from predators or fight them off. The ones who could push through pain and injury were the ones who lived long enough to have children." She showed him more data. Human pain tolerance was remarkably high. Their healing rate was faster than most species. They could survive injuries that would kill others. "We're built to take damage and keep going," Sora said. "It's not pretty, but it works." That night, requested a meeting with Sergeant. The Marine commander agreed and met him in the ship's observation deck. They sat looking at the stars in silence for a while, then spoke. "Sergeant, I watched your team board the ship. You lost 3 Marines in that action." "4," corrected quietly. "Corporal Menu died this morning from his wounds." "My condolences," said. "But my question is, how do you order people to do something so dangerous?" Was quiet for a long moment. "I don't order them, they volunteer. Every Marine on this ship volunteered for combat duty." He looked at. "We know it's dangerous. We know we might die, but we do it anyway." "Why?" "Because it matters." His voice was firm. "Those colonists mattered. The next people they attack will matter. Someone has to stand against bullies and monsters. Might as well be us." "You are not afraid of death." Laughed, but it was a sad sound. "I'm terrified of death. Every Marine is, but fear doesn't mean we don't act. It means we act despite being afraid." He stood up. "Tomorrow we hold a memorial for the fallen. You should come. You might understand better." The next day the crew gathered in the main hangar. All the dead were there, in sealed containers ready for space burial. Captain stood before them. He spoke about each person who had died. Not just their rank or position, but who they were. Their hobbies, their families, their dreams. He made them real. Then he said, "These people died protecting others. They died doing what they believed was right. We honor them not just with words, but by continuing the mission. By protecting those who cannot protect themselves. By being the shield against darkness." The containers were launched into space, where they would drift among the stars forever. Watched the crew grieve. They cried and hugged each other. But by the end of the ceremony, they were also smiling, sharing stories about their fallen friends. That evening, had a conversation with Captain in his ready room. "I am beginning to understand," said. "Humans are not fearless. You are terrified just like any species, but you fight anyway." Nodded. "Fear is healthy, it keeps you sharp, but we can't let it control us." "Your physiology gives you advantages," continued. "Your endurance, your pain tolerance, your ability to function while damaged. But that is not the whole story." "No, it's not," agreed. "Plenty of species are physically impressive. What makes humans different is here." He tapped his chest. "We choose to fight. We choose to protect. We choose to stand up even when we're scared. They are stronger than you. They are larger, more aggressive, better armed." "All true," said, "but they have a weakness. When the battle turns against them, they retreat to preserve themselves. They fight for conquest and glory. We fight for each other, for our friends, our families, for strangers we'll never meet. That makes all the difference." Was quiet, processing this. "Tomorrow we receive orders for our next mission," said. "The main fleet is moving. We're being called to join the defense. It will make this last battle look easy. And your crew will go willingly. They'll race to their stations," said with a slight smile. Finally understood why the galaxy trembled before humanity. Not because of their weapons or technology. Because they were a species that simply refused to break, refused to quit, refused to abandon those in need. They were terrifying not because of what they were, but because of what they chose to be. The orders came through as promised. Stood on the bridge of the Indomitable as Captain read them aloud. "The main fleet is advancing on Covenant Prime, the heart of the Alliance. 200 warships. They intend to break us in one massive assault." Looked up at his crew. "The human fleet will meet them. 50 ships. We are to delay them until Covenant reinforcements arrive." 50 ships against 200. Felt his blood run cold. This wasn't a battle. This was a massacre. "Those odds are impossible," said. Lieutenant turned from her console. "We've faced worse." "No, you haven't," insisted. "Even for humans, this is suicide." Captain smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a predator. "They are counting on that math. They think numbers will win. They're wrong." Over the next day, the human fleet assembled. Watched as 50 warships gathered in formation. The Indomitable was still damaged from the last battle, and her engineers had worked miracles. The ship could fight. Admiral, commander of the human fleet, sent a message to all ships. Listen from the bridge. Soldiers of humanity, the admiral's voice was clear and strong. Today we face an enemy that believes we are weak. They believe fear will make us retreat. They are wrong. She paused. We fight today not for glory or conquest. We fight for every innocent person behind us, for every child, every family, every being that deserves to live in peace. They bring only death and slavery. We are the wall that stops them. Saw the effect these words had on the crew. They stood, their eyes hardened with determination. They outnumber us 4-1, Admiral continued. Good, that means 4 times the targets. All ships prepare for battle, and remember, they have to destroy all of us to win. We only have to make them afraid. Show them what human warriors can do. Show them why the galaxy should never underestimate humanity. Admiral out. The bridge erupted in cheers. Couldn't believe it. They were cheering about facing impossible odds. Sergeant arrived on the bridge in full combat armor. His Marines were ready. Captain, we've got a special volunteer for the first boarding action, said. A young woman stepped forward. She was small, even by human standards. Corporal reporting, sir. Is our best combat medic, explained. She volunteered for the most dangerous assignment. Looked at her. You volunteered to board enemy ships, as a medic. Nodded. Someone needs to keep our Marines alive. Might as well be me. You could die. Yes, sir, she said calmly, but my team won't die alone. Captain clasped her shoulder. Good hunting, Corporal. Thank you, sir. The human fleet began moving toward the fleet, studied the tactical display. They were in a standard formation, confident in their numbers. The human ships were spreading out in what looked like a random pattern. What is the strategy? Asked. Chaos, Lieutenant replied. She was working multiple displays at once, coordinating with other ships. They expect us to fight defensively. They think we'll form a tight formation and try to hold them off. Instead, we're going to split their fleet and make them chase us. That will leave individual ships vulnerable. That's the point, said. We're using ourselves as bait. Every ship they send after us is a ship not attacking the colony. And while they chase us, we hit them from angles they don't expect. It was insane. It was reckless. It was the most human strategy had ever heard. The 2 fleets came into weapons range. They fired first. The human ships scattered like birds, dodging and weaving. Return fire lanced back at them. The battle began. Watched in awe as the human ships danced through space. They moved in ways that should have been impossible for vessels that size. They coordinated attacks, 3 or 4 ships hitting one cruiser from different angles, then breaking away before the enemy could respond effectively. But they had numbers. Human ships started taking damage. He watched on the tactical display as one ship's icon turned red, then vanished. Destroyed. The horizon is gone, reported quietly. Noted, said, continue the attack. Another ship fell, then another. The humans were taking losses they couldn't afford. But they were taking losses too. Human weapons were precise and deadly. They targeted engines, weapons, command centers. They disabled ships rather than destroying them when possible, making them spread their resources to protect damaged vessels. They're adapting to our tactics, warned. They're forming groups. Expected, said. Time for Phase 2. All ships execute Plan Omega. Watched in horror as the human ships turned and raced directly at the formation. They weren't retreating. They weren't dodging. They were charging straight in. Captain, what are you doing? Shouted. Showing them who we are, replied calmly. The human ships hit the formation like spears. They punched through the enemy lines, weapons firing constantly. Some ships rammed vessels, destroying both in massive explosions. The bridge shook violently as the Indomitable took hit after hit. Fire suppression systems worked overtime. Crew members were thrown from their stations. Engineer's voice came over the comm. Captain, I'm routing power from life support to weapons. We won't need oxygen if we're dead anyway." "Good thinking," replied. Lieutenant was bleeding from a cut above her eye, but she never stopped working her console. "Enemy flagship identified. It's coordinating their fleet." "Then let's introduce ourselves," said. "Helm, set course for the flagship." The Indomitable turned toward the largest ship. It was massive, twice the size of any human vessel. It bristled with weapons. "Are your Marines ready?" asked. "Always," the sergeant replied. Dr. Sara was moving through the bridge, treating wounded while explosions rocked the ship. She worked calmly, efficiently, as if she was in a peaceful medical bay instead of a warship being torn apart. "We're taking too much damage," someone shouted. "Then we better make it count," said. "All power to engines, ramming speed." His eyes widened. "You cannot be serious." "I'm very serious," said. "But we're not actually ramming. Launch when we're in range." The Indomitable raced toward the flagship. Every weapon on both ships fired. The human ship was coming apart, but it didn't slow down. At the last moment, boarding pods launched from the Indomitable. Dozens of armored Marines shot across space toward the enemy flagship. The Indomitable veered away, engines screaming with the strain. It barely avoided collision. Switched to the Marine camera feeds. Sergeant's team had breached the flagship. They were fighting through corridors filled with warriors. Corporal was there, her medical pack on her back, but a weapon in her hands. She fought alongside the others, then stopped to treat a wounded Marine, then fought again. "Push forward," his voice came through. "Get to their command center." The Marines advanced room by room. There were fierce warriors, but the humans fought with a desperation the enemy couldn't match. Every Marine knew this was a one-way trip. They weren't planning to survive. They were planning to win. On the Indomitable's bridge, the situation was dire. Half the consoles were destroyed. Bodies lay where crew members had fallen, but those still alive kept fighting. Young had taken over a weapons station after its operator was killed. He was firing with grim determination, his hands steady despite his obvious fear. Saw something extraordinary happening on the tactical display. The fleet was faltering, not because they were losing, they still had superior numbers, but because the humans wouldn't stop. Ship after ship, the humans kept coming. When damaged, they rammed. When boarded, they self-destructed to take the enemy with them. When all weapons were gone, they used the ships themselves as weapons. And then heard it. At first he thought it was his imagination, but no, the humans were singing. It was an old battle song, ancient even by human standards. The crew of the Indomitable sang as they fought. Other ships joined in. Across the entire human fleet, warriors sang as they faced death. They had never experienced anything like this. They were used to enemies that retreated when hurt, that surrendered when outnumbered. But these humans just kept coming, kept fighting, kept singing. "Reached the flagship command center," reported. On the monitor, watched the Marines burst into the command center. They fought the guards. Sergeant himself confronted the fleet admiral. "Your fleet will stand down," said, his weapon trained on the admiral. "Or I detonate charges and destroy this ship." The admiral was huge, terrifying, but he was also afraid, could see it in the admiral's eyes. This enemy didn't understand these humans who refused to die quietly. "You're bluffing," the admiral said. Smiled, "Try me." The standoff lasted seconds that felt like hours. Then the admiral gave the order. The fleet began to withdraw. They were retreating. They were actually retreating. The human fleet hadn't won through superior firepower or numbers. They'd won through sheer psychological warfare. They'd shown the something terrifying, an enemy that would never, ever give up. On the Indomitable's bridge, the crew erupted in weak cheers. They were exhausted, wounded, barely alive, but they had won. Captain slumped in his chair for the first time. "Damage report." "Ship is barely functional," said, But we're alive, most of us. Admiral's voice came over the fleet channel. All ships well done. They are in full retreat. Covenant reinforcements are arriving. We did it. Looked around the shattered bridge. They had lost 17 ships, hundreds, maybe thousands of human lives, but they had saved millions. And the Empire now knew true fear. The Indomitable drifted in space, held together more by hope than engineering, walked through corridors that had been sealed to space just hours ago. Emergency force fields held back the void. The air was cold and smelled of smoke and melted metal. The ship had taken catastrophic damage, 60% casualties, had seen the numbers, had watched good people die, yet the survivors were already working on repairs. He found Engineer in what remained of the engine room. She had been working for over 40 hours straight. Her face was gray with exhaustion, her hands shaking from fatigue, but she was still calibrating systems. "You should rest," told her. Looked up and gave him a tired smile. "I'll rest when the engines are stable. We need to get to the repair station. Can't do that if we break down halfway there." "But you are barely standing." "I've got a few more hours in me," she said. She patted a damaged panel. "This old girl saved our lives. Least I can do is keep her running." She paused. "Besides, the wounded need to get to a proper medical facility. Dr. Sora can only do so much here." Watched her work. She moved with practiced efficiency despite her exhaustion. This was what humans did. They pushed beyond their limits because others needed them. He moved on to the medical bay. It was overflowing with wounded. Dr. Sora moved between patients like a ghost, treating the worst cases first. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep, but her hands were steady. Corporal was there too, helping despite her own injuries. She had a bandage around her ribs and walked with a limp, but she refused to stop working. "How many will survive?" asked Sora quietly. "Most of them," Sora replied. "Humans are tough. We heal well if we can survive the first few hours." She moved to another patient, checking vital signs. "We lost too many, though. Good people." In one corner of the medical bay, Sergeant lay on a bed. His right arm was gone, severed in the fighting on the flagship. He was conscious, staring at the ceiling. Approached him. "Sergeant, I am sorry for your injury." Turned his head. "Thanks, but I'll be okay. They'll fit me with a prosthetic. I'll be back on duty in a few months." "You plan to return to combat?" "Of course," said as if it was obvious. "My team needs me, and there's still work to do." "You have given enough," said. "You have sacrificed your arm. No one would blame you for retiring." Laughed, though it sounded painful. "I didn't sacrifice my arm. I used it to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. That's not a sacrifice. That's just doing what's right." He looked at his missing arm. "Besides, some of my Marines didn't make it back. I owe it to them to keep fighting." Was silent. This warrior had lost part of himself and still thought only of continuing the mission. The next day, a memorial service was held. This time it was different. The fleet had lost so many that multiple ships held ceremonies simultaneously. On the Indomitable, Captain stood before containers holding the fallen. The hangar was packed with crew members. Everyone who could walk was there. Spoke about each person. Had watched him do this before, but this time there were too many names. The captain's voice grew hoarse, but he didn't stop. He honored every single person who had died. "They gave everything," finally said. "They knew the odds, they knew the risks, but they went anyway because that's what heroes do. And make no mistake, each of them was a hero." He paused, looking at the assembled crew. "We won this battle, but the war continues. The still threaten the galaxy. We will continue to stand against them. We will continue to protect those who cannot protect themselves. And we will honor our fallen not with words alone, but with action." The containers were launched into space. Watched them drift away, carrying human warriors to rest among the stars. After the service, he found Lieutenant on the observation deck. She had bandages on her head and her arm in a sling, but she was reviewing tactical reports on a tablet. "You should be resting," said. "So should everyone," replied. "But work doesn't stop just because we're tired." She looked at him. "What did you think of the battle?" "It was," struggled for words. "I have never seen anything like it. Your species fights like no other." "We fight like we have to," said. "They won't stop themselves. Someone has to stand against them." "But why humans? Why must it always be humans who sacrifice?" Smiled sadly. "It's not just humans. The Covenant fights too, so do others, but humans," she thought for a moment. "We evolved fighting for survival every single day. We come from a world that tried to kill us constantly. So when we face an enemy, we don't see impossible odds. We see just another challenge to overcome. Even when you are afraid." "Especially when we're afraid," said. "Fear means we understand the danger, but we don't let it control us." Over the next few days, completed his report. He recorded interviews with crew members. He analyzed the battles. He tried to put into words what made humans so formidable. He had a final conversation with engineer in the repaired engine room. She had finally slept and looked more alive. "I have been thinking about something you said," told her. "That humans fight because someone has to, and you can take it." Nodded. "Yeah, we're not special. We're not the or strongest, but we can endure. We can keep going when others stop, and sometimes that's enough." "But at what cost?" asked. "You have lost so many people." "Every loss hurts," said quietly. "We're not machines. We grieve, we hurt, but we don't let the pain stop us from doing what's necessary." She smiled. "That's the human way. We take the hits and keep standing." Compiled his final report for the Covenant Council. He wrote, "I have observed human warriors in combat. I have seen them face impossible odds. I have watched them sacrifice themselves without hesitation, and I now understand why the galaxy trembles before them. Humans are not fearless. They are deeply afraid, perhaps more than any species I have known, but they fight anyway. Humans are not physically superior. They are small and fragile compared to many warrior species, but they have turned their weaknesses into strengths. Their fragility makes them creative. Their mortality makes them fierce. Their empathy makes them protective. Humans evolved on a death world where survival was never guaranteed. They learned to endure, to persist, to refuse defeat. This trait is embedded in their very being. In battle, humans employ tactics that seem suicidal. They sacrifice parts of ships to save the whole. They board enemy vessels knowing they likely won't return. They charge forward when logic says to retreat. But there is method to this madness. Humans understand that some things are worth dying for, protecting innocence, defending the weak, standing against tyranny. They don't fight for glory or conquest. They fight because they believe it is right. Most terrifying of all, humans do not give up, ever. They can be wounded, exhausted, outnumbered, but they keep fighting, they keep standing, they keep trying. They are learning this truth. They face an enemy that cannot be intimidated, cannot be outlasted, cannot be broken through force alone. My recommendation to the Covenant Council: treasure this alliance with humanity. They are the finest warriors I have ever witnessed, not because of what they are, but because of what they choose to be. And if possible, never give them reason to fight against us. Because if humanity ever turned their determination against the Covenant, I do not believe we could survive." He finished the report and sent it. Then he made a personal request to the Covenant Council. He asked for permanent assignment to human forces. Captain called him to the bridge when the approval came through. "Welcome back aboard," said with a smile. "Though I'm surprised you want to stay, haven't we put you through enough?" "You have shown me what true courage looks like," replied. "I wish to continue learning, if you will have me." "We'd be honored," said. Young brought a cup of coffee. He had learned that humans consumed this beverage constantly. "Here's to new crew members," said cheerfully. Lieutenant looked up from her console. "Fair warning, we've already received new orders. Another fleet is gathering. We ship out in 3 days." "So soon?" asked. "The war doesn't wait," said. "But that's okay, we're ready." Looked around the bridge. These humans had been through hell. They had lost friends and shipmates. They were still healing from their wounds. Their ship was barely repaired. But they were ready to go back into battle. Dr. Sora arrived on the bridge with medical supplies. Sergeant followed her, testing his new prosthetic arm. Corporal was behind them, her limp already less noticeable. Engineer's voice came over the comm. "Captain, engines are at full capacity. We're ready to fly." "Excellent work," said. He looked at his crew, then at, "Are you sure about this? It won't get easier." Thought about everything he had witnessed. The battles, the sacrifices, the losses. The humans never claimed to be heroes. They never boasted about their strength. They simply did what needed to be done, no matter the cost. "I am certain," said. "I wish to stand with warriors who fight not for themselves but for others. That is a cause worth serving." Captain smiled. "Then welcome to the Indomitable. Let me tell you about our next mission." As the captain explained the plan, listened carefully. Another battle, another impossible situation. But this time he wasn't afraid. He was with humans, and humans didn't believe in impossible. In his final personal log wrote, "I came to observe warriors. I found heroes who don't think of themselves as heroes. I came to understand why the galaxy trembles before humanity. The answer is simple and terrifying. Humanity trembles at nothing. Not death, not pain, not impossible odds. They face everything with the same stubborn determination. They choose to stand when others would kneel. They choose to fight when others would flee. They choose to protect when others would abandon. And that might be the most human and most dangerous thing of all. I am honored to stand with them." The Indomitable set course for its next mission. Somewhere in the galaxy, the Empire was gathering its forces. They would learn, as all enemies of humanity eventually learned, that there are some species you cannot defeat through force alone. Because humanity didn't just fight with weapons. They fought with hope, with determination, with an unbreakable will. And that made all the difference.